welcome to the virtual roundtable, applying for US veterinary pathology residency programs as an international candidate. So here today we are hoping to share our experiences and what we thought were beneficial for us when applying to these programs. And I really hope that everyone will get most out of this session. So before we start, we would like to have Dr. Paolo Barato from the Latin Comparative Pathology Group, the president of the Latin Comparative Pathology Group, to give us a few introductory words. And after that, we would proceed with this meeting.
Thank you so much, Joe. Thank you so much for all the speakers and, of course, all the participants. This initiative is a result of LCPG meetings that we did last year with our members, and a lot of them asking about these kind of subjects because, of course, it's interest for all of us related with veterinary pathology. So thank you so much for all of you. Of course, for Ileana Miranda. Ileana was behind of this organization to contact of all of you to organize, and of course, DTF, Davis-Thompson Foundation, with all the people involved there, Rachel and everyone. So, and as always, the support of Paco and the people in DTF is important. So thank you so much, and we can start.
Great, thank you so much. So I guess we would start with our introductions as panelists, and we would go to the actual questions from there. So I can start. If you give me a second. So I hope you can all see my screen. So yes, my name is Sho Nakagan. I am originally from Japan. So I did my DVM in Japan, the northern part of Japan, Hokkaido. In Japan, the system is quite different, and it's a 6-year course, and from the 4th year, we get assigned into a laboratory. So I was in the pathology laboratory and focusing on bovine diagnostic pathology. And from there on, I did a PhD in Japan, focusing on cetacean pathology, so dolphins and whales. I was particularly looking into amyloidosis and liver fluke infections in cetaceans. And I am currently a 2nd-year anatomic pathology resident at Cornell. So my main interests, ever since I got interested in animals, I guess, was always in wildlife and wildlife conservation. So I wanted to pursue a career in pathology to contribute to wildlife pathology and conservation. Since starting this residency, I got into ocular pathology as well. So that is more of my current interest. And my career goals is to improve and disseminate veterinary pathology diagnostics and research in Southeast Asia. So I hope to bring back some knowledge and techniques back into that area. And again, conservation through veterinary pathology. So when applying to residency programs, I actually applied to 6 different programs, and I visited all 6 programs beforehand. So that was a little, well, that took some time and some money, but I think that was worth it for my purposes. And I guess we would go deeper into that subject later on. So that was just my quick self-introduction. Sophie, do you want to go next?
I sure can try. Okay, give me a second. We're going to try and avoid any little issues. So let me share my screen. Okay. And I think you're seeing the presenter's view now, right? And this should be the right view. Cool, made it. So hi everyone, I'm Sophie. I'm a 2nd-year anatomic pathology resident at Cornell, currently with Sho. We started at the same time. I'm originally from Belgium, small European country just to the north of France. That is not France, do not mix them up. And we're not especially known for cutting edge pathology, but probably rather for our food like fries, waffles, and beer. I encourage you to visit if you ever get a chance to, just to try that out. I got the chance during my last year at university to do my senior year externship in Japan in the diagnostic pathology lab of the University of Miyazaki. And that is actually when I really fell head over heels for pathology. When I came back before I graduated, I really thought that this was what I wanted to do with my life. And so I graduated in 2018 from the University of Liège and went straight into the pharmaceutical industry. So mostly in toxpath, and you're seeing that little mouse because I was mostly exposed to rats and mouse pathology when working. And I actually tried to apply directly to US programs shortly after I started working, but I got rejected from everywhere, although I got a couple interviews. So I asked them what I could improve, and I started traveling a bit for work, doing presentations, giving talks, and trying to present posters and to network with people, mostly in the US. Applied again and was lucky enough to be accepted at Cornell. So jumped over the pond and landed in Ithaca. These are my main interests, mostly interested, as you might have noticed from the previous slide, in toxicology, pathology, comparative path, oncology, and cancer research. So I think that is mostly what I'm going to try and aim for with my career, but I think I still have some time to think of it. And that's all for me. And stop sharing. All right.
Suzanne, do you want to go next?
Sure. Okay, so I'll share my screen. Okay, so can you guys all see my screen? Okay. So my name is Susana Lin, and I'm originally from Taiwan. As you can see, it's a small island next to China, and it's not Thailand, it's Taiwan, the red part. And this is the view of the Taipei 101 Power Building. And I did my DVM back in National Taiwan University. And after graduation, I think actually before I graduated, I thought, oh, maybe I want to do pathology because that's something that you can kind of really know what's going on. And also it's not like the clinical part is so fast paced. So I really like the pathology world. And then so later, after I graduated, I participated in the master program. And it's also kind of like a combined training program. So I did have some training there regarding pathology. So we usually have a lot of surgical biopsies. And also we went to Taipei Zoo. So you can see here is me, also short-haired. And so I had my master there and did my pathology training. And during the time, I also went to ACVP meeting and to meet friends. And after that, I think actually the second year when I was studying my master program, I got a scholarship from the Taiwanese government. So that's enabled me to study abroad. So I think after the third year, I applied for many schools, and because I have my own funding, so that's another way that you can apply for a residency program if you have your own funding. And for me, because that's the funding for a PhD program, so I could only apply for the combined residency program, and then okay, later on. After graduation, I actually spent about 8 months in the National Laboratory Animal Center. So there, I mostly dealt with the lab animals like mice and rats and rabbits. And luckily, actually, before I joined the National Laboratory Animal Center, I already applied for a residency and I got accepted by Iowa State University. And so currently I'm here as a PhD candidate and / anatopathology resident. So my research now, I'm doing research with Dr. Burrow, focusing on swine dysentery, because that's something specialty here for Iowa. We have a lot of pigs, and that'll be my experience. And I enjoy the life here, although it's very cold, as you can see. We have some snow here, and I have a lot of good resident mates. So I'm happy to answer any questions later on. Thank you.
Thanks, Suzanne. Judith, do you want to go next?
Yes, sure. Hi everyone, I'm Judith Volkan. I'm a third-year anatomic pathology resident at UC Davis, and here at UC Davis we have different tracks in the residency, and I'm doing the lab animal pathology track. So that means that in my third year of residency, I am at the Comparative Pathology Laboratory at the National Primate Center. Whereas the first 2 years of the residency, I'm at the Veterinary Medicine Hospital at UC Davis with the other tracks. I'm from Sweden originally, born in Malmö in the south of Sweden. I went to vet school in Copenhagen, Denmark, and just as in Japan, it's 6 years of vet school, so it encompasses both like undergraduate and veterinary training. I applied for pathology residencies in the US straight out of vet school because I was learned through vet school that that's what I wanted to do. But I actually was very unsuccessful. I think I applied for 4 or 5 programs and I didn't get any interviews at all. So after that, I started practicing as a small animal veterinarian for a little bit while looking into building on my CV a little bit to be more attractive for pathology residencies. And I applied for and was accepted for an internship in anatomic and clinical pathology at Ross University School of Veterinary Medicine in the Caribbean in St. Kitts, which was a combined program. It was a 2-year program combined with a Master of Science and anatomic and clinical pathology. During that time, the university there was, they had some funds for traveling and meetings. So during those 2 years, I was able to go both to some C.L. Davis courses in gross pathology and descriptive pathology, and I was able to go both to the European and American pathology conferences. And during those travels, I was also able to visit some of the programs in the US. So I spent some time during my internship trying to network and find out where I wanted to go and how to improve my residency application. So out of that internship, I applied for a lot of residencies in the US. I applied for, I think, 8 or 9 different positions, and I got multiple offers. So it went better than the first time. But I settled on the UC Davis program, which is I've been very happy about. So finishing that up now.
Thank you, Judith. I guess we have a lot of comparative pathology, lab animal pathology oriented people here, which is great. So Cheng, do you want to go next?
Sure, let me share my screen. Are you guys able to see my PowerPoint? Here we go. Are you guys able to see? Sorry, I can't hear.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So, hi everybody. My name is Cheng Yang, and I just realized I have many common experience with the panelists today. I'm very glad. So I'm currently a dermatopathology fellow at the University of Pennsylvania. I am originally from Taiwan, And I did my DVM degree at National Taiwan University from 2011 to 17. We have a 5-year program. And during my 3rd year, I discovered my interest in pathology. And that was the time I decided to do externships. So I visited Japan and spent a year visiting Gifu University, the pathology laboratory over there. And I also, after coming back to Taiwan, I decided to visit different veterinary schools in the US to do externship in the pathology rotation. And so that was kind of my experiences, understanding how the pathology works in the US, and also kind of build up my interest in making sure that pathology is something I want to do in the future for my future job. And at the same time, I also thought that having research experiences is very important for application of pathology residency. So I also joined the pathology laboratory in Taiwan. They also worked on several research projects, which I do think it's really helpful for my residency application. And at my last year during vet school, I applied to all the programs that I can find in US, about 10-ish programs. And fortunately, I was accepted to multiple programs at the time for the first try. And so at the time, because I my career goal is to become an academic pathologist. So I decided to pursue a combined pathology residency and PhD program at The Ohio State University. And I'm very glad that I successfully passed board last year. So now I'm working as a pathologist here at Penn. And my future goal is to continue to work in academia and be able to provide excellent diagnostic service for dermatopathology, also provide excellent veterinary education experiences to the students, and also support to the biomedical research. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Excellent. Thank you very much, everyone. So as written in the chat, if you have not seen the chat before, please do. We have a list of questions that we are going to address through this meeting. But if you do have additional questions, please feel free to put it in the chat or the Q&A box. So we'll go around taking turns tackling these questions. So we'll start from the first question, which is, what is required to apply for a residency program in the US?
So I can start with answering that, and I'm really happy if anyone else has any other input to it. But in my experience, and I looked into this in 2018 when I applied, there was quite a difference in different programs in what the official requirements were. What all of them had in common is that you were required to have a DVM and then send in your CV, a personal letter, and 3 letters of reference. But in addition to that, some of the programs required you to have graduated from an AVMA accredited school to be able to be licensed in the US. And I am not, like Copenhagen is not accredited. So I didn't apply for those. I think it was maybe 4 or 5 of the programs I looked into, like a 4th maybe of the programs I contacted that had that requirement. There were about the same number of programs that required you to have a green card, which I also don't have, so I didn't apply for those. But the majority of the programs that I looked into did not have those requirements. In addition, at least there are some programs that are combined residency and PhD, and I think most of those programs requires you to take the GRE test. But I don't think any of the other programs looked into that. And I'm speculating now, but I'm thinking that's a requirement from the school for being accepted into the graduate program more than the residency, and that there's a set limit that you should perform above. So I don't think they sort on like having the best GRE or something like that. And then a lot of the programs also required you to have some kind of English test results. TOEFL was the standard one. I think now they also accept Duolingo, at least at UC Davis. during the pandemic that you can take from home, which is cheaper. But some kind of like documented English speaking capabilities is wished for. That's all I could think of. Does anyone of the other panelists have any other requirements that they run into?
I think that was very complete. I'm sorry for interrupting you. And I thought that it was interesting that you brought up the AVMA accredited issue with schools, because it's the same for me in Belgium. It's not accredited. But for prospective international applicants on that call, just be aware that there's a difference between accredited and listed. AVMA listed is a bunch of schools. AVMA accredited is a kind of private VIP club. So make sure that you make the difference.
Oh, that's great to bring up. And I actually think it's required to take the boards to be on an AVMA listed school. So if you're not on an AVMA listed school, you might be in trouble, but AVMA accredited is not the requirement. So that's a distinction that's important.
And I also want to add that I would say some programs that would say they prefer to take candidates with the AVMA accredited school, but it's still worth a try to apply to those schools because it's preferred, not necessary. So don't give up those opportunities, just apply for it and see if they like you and they'll take you.
Excellent point.
I would also probably recommend you to write directly to the different programs you're interested in and ask for their, because the requirements can change. The visa rules can change and the requirements from the university to hire an international student can change. And you don't want to, it's a lot of time and work to put into a good application. And you don't want to do that to a program where they automatically will bin you in a not so much bin. My advice.
Great points. If no one else has anything to add, I guess we can move on to the second question. Okay, so the next question we have is, what is considered a successful application?
So I think a successful application is considered when you get accepted. I'm just kidding. So I would say reach out to the program coordinator early because position may fill out very soon. So every program coordinator, I think they all have their contact information listed on the ACVP website. So that's a really good resource that you have to reach out to them early and talk about and get some information about what is the program be like and when is the timeline for their program for application, because some programs they have early application time period and some have later on. And I know at this point it's really hard to do any externship because maybe the COVID get many people into trouble. So I would say online externship is also something that's worth asking. So you can show your passion about what you like about veterinary pathology, your related experience. And it's also good if you have your own funding resource, because that's something that for my situation, initially I have my own funding resource. So we have figured out another way that later on I'm now funded by the program, but initially I use my own funding resource. And so a good successful application, I think, reach out to the coordinator soon and also show your passion and also ask about a lot of opportunities if you can participate in any online externship, because it's very important to let the program know you exist and know that you really want to participate in the pathology training. Yep. If anyone wants to add on.
I think that was very complete. I guess we can move on to the third question. Is it necessary or recommended to visit the programs or do internships before applying? So this is kind of in relation to the previous question too.
Yeah, and I'm also seeing that we have a chat that actually is asking about internships and if it makes your CV more attractive. So I guess that that question hopefully is going to tackle that. So I would say that it's not necessary to visit programs, but it's highly recommended, and especially as a foreigner. Because first, it'll allow you to understand if you like the program, if it's tailored to your needs, to the way you want to learn, if the caseload fits your abilities and your style of studying, your working style. Programs are extremely different from one another. Would it just be on the basis of being more didactic or being more on a case-based manner of learning? So yeah, not necessary, but highly recommended. Doing internships definitely improves your CV because, again, as Susan was saying before, it shows that you actually have a strong interest in pathology, and it's easier for a university to hire someone who actually shows interest in the discipline. And any kind of little experience, even really small pathology experience that you get, just put it on your CV because it might be in the back of your mind and you might know that you have done it, but it doesn't especially show up in your application. So just write it down, make sure that it shows somewhere in your application. And I think that a last thing that I could advocate for is that visiting programs was tough in terms of fundings, as was mentioned a couple times before this question. I think Cornell is the only program that I visited with my own funds because I was really attracted to it. And the other ones, I was lucky enough to be sponsored by work after I earned the travel awards, and I just stayed a bit longer in the US to travel. But use the opportunity to do virtual externships. Many universities are offering that right now, so you can just directly write to the program in which you're interested and just ask them, hey, are you offering virtual rotations, like 1 or 2 week rotations? And this counts as an externship now. So don't hesitate to do that.
If I could just add, I agree with everything. And I also especially agree with how expensive and hard it is to visit multiple programs. But I can recommend, if life ever goes back to normal, to maybe participate in live in-person conferences and CL Davis courses, because that makes you, it's both other content than networking, like you get to learn a lot, and B, you can network with multiple programs at the same time. And you don't get to visit the program, but you can get to meet residents from the program and faculty from the program, and that can give you like a really good idea if that program is somewhere you want to go. So I did that, and I'm often instead of visiting, and I was really happy about that.
I agree with all what you guys have mentioned. I just want to add another perspective to visiting programs. So I think, especially we are all international applicants, we probably have experiences in pathology elsewhere other than the US. So I think if you have opportunity to visit a US pathology program, it actually shows the school that you know how it works, how the pathology laboratory works, how the autopsy or biopsy works in the US, so that they have an idea that, okay, you are an international applicant, you have experiences not only in your country, but also in the US. And I do think that will help them to know you better. And then potentially this could improve your, increase your opportunity to be considered as a good candidate. And another thing about externships, I totally agree that a lot of time you have to cover up your own expenses. The schools will not pay for it. But there are a couple scholarships if the life is normal. I'm not covering in the pandemic situation, but there are a couple scholarships that you potentially can apply to, like ACVP externship scholarship. And also IVSA, they do offer scholarship for students to do externship in all different specialties. So I think it will be good for your CV and also to help you financially to visit schools you applying for these scholarships.
Great points. The next question is also somewhat related. So it is, how can one prepare for the application? So I can't speak for every single program, but for the programs that I at least applied to, the requirements were a CV, letter of intent, and 3 recommendation letters were the biggest ones, plus the English proficiency requirements too. But since they are basing your application on just those few files, I think it is most important to work on those. Especially, I thought the letter of intent was especially important. And it really helps to put a face to the documents, just like these printed out papers, if you actually do visit the program, or if possible, go to a conference and network. Because as well, I was thinking that as a foreigner, no one knows me, but if I do meet people at a conference or at the program itself, then your face is known, and that I think would give a lot of, give a lot of difference to the application itself. And in terms of the recommendation letters, I think it is really important to have at least one ACVP board certified pathologist on the list of people who can write you a recommendation letter. So I know that some programs won't even consider your application if you don't have one ACVP board certified pathologist on the list of people. So you have to think back when planning for this application to know that person well enough so that they can write you a good letter, and you have to, So, and also in terms of the CV, the more things you have to put on your CV, the more impressive it is, obviously. So that could either be just a lot of externships at different programs, or it could be a lot of articles published in peer-reviewed science literature. So I think that would also depend on your tactic or what you are currently doing, because if you're a vet student, you don't have a lot of opportunity to publish research projects, but you can work around in different ways. So that was my take for that question. I guess we can move on.
That I think it's a really good idea, and this goes for all applications, to show your application to someone before you send it in. That's a bit scary and intimidating to apply for things, in my humble opinion, but it gives a lot of value to your application to have different people read through it. So I would recommend that.
Completely agree with that, and especially if you can try to someone who's used to actually applying to programs or to work positions in the US, because the way you make your CV in your home country is not especially the same as in the US, and there are like mild differences. Here my understanding is that people really like to see every single thing you have done, especially related to pathology on your CV. But I know that back in Belgium, I would never be that detailed in my CV. I would just put the main titles of the main positions that I've had. And I definitely like changed that the first time that I applied, and that didn't work out. I completely switched and made a much more detailed version of my CV. And I think that also helps a lot. So be aware of that.
Yes, having different perspectives definitely helps. So show it to as many people as you can and get a lot of feedback. Okay, next question. Is there an exam to enter the program? What about NAVLE?
So I would say you don't need a NAVLE to apply for pathology programs, but you will have to take a TOEFL and plus or minus GRE depending on the programs that you're applying for.
Excellent. Next question. Do you need to validate your DVM diploma?
I was assigned to answer this, but I actually don't remember. I think that you have to send in transcripts directly from the university you attended to most of the programs. For sitting for the board exam, I had to send in a translated copy of my veterinary diploma and with like an authorized translator. But I didn't need to do that for applying for the program. But at some point, it's good if you don't have an English version of your diploma. At some point, it's good to have it translated.
Great. When does the process of application and selection start?
So I'm assigned for this question. I think the ACVP website is your good friend because you can search any training opportunities on the ACVP website. And I think every program has their different application time frame. So keep in mind that go online frequently and see. And also the school websites, sometimes they also have their different information. And I know some schools starting in June, like as early in June, but most I think later on before Christmas and around the ACVP meeting, it's also when there's no pandemic, it's also a good time for the applicants to be there and maybe doing some and even like face-to-face interview, just like talking. And so I think the selection may start around November, December. That's the timeline. I think it's the normal timeline. But some program actually starts later. For example, I think Iowa State University now we're having a position, so it's kind of late. But I know it really depends. So go to the website frequently and find out the timeline. And maybe you guys have some other thoughts about the timeline and the selection time period.
I agree with always what you said. I think it's important to prepare early so that you give people who's going to write your recommendation some time to submit the letters.
Yeah, that's
Yes, definitely.
also an important point. And also because since you are maybe applying for multiple schools, it's also better to give them a list and also write down every deadlines for them because it's your job to prepare that. Yeah.
The earlier you start preparing, the better, just so that you have more time to show it to other people too. Okay, next question. How is the selection process?
I can take that one. I think it varies between universities, and I probably can talk only for Cornell. And the way the selection process goes here is, and I'm pretty sure that this part is pretty similar in all universities. There is a committee that reviews the applications of people who are interested in the program. And here the committee is typically formed of the section chief, the residency director, one person from the veterinary support services, which are practicing veterinarians that work with us mainly for ancillary tests and relation with clients and initial diagnosis. And we are actually very lucky to have second-year residents always included in that committee. So our comments are taken into account by the residency director and the section chief. That's tough to see. So yeah, we're really lucky in that. Then we review the application files and we make a pre-selection, probably 10 to 15 people, and send out invitations for interviews. And based on how interviews go, I believe that we offer between 2 and 3 positions per year, and we usually send out an answer pretty quick. At least a vague idea of how your interview went should come back pretty quick to you within maybe 2 weeks or something like that. Yeah, that's basically how it goes here. I don't know how different it is in other schools, or if you have anything to add, show that I probably missed.
Okay, guess we'll move on to the next question. Just so everyone knows, we do have a few questions in the Q&A box, but I guess we'll address the preset questions first and then try and incorporate anything in the Q&A if it is related. And if not, we'll just answer everything at the end, if that works out. So the next question is, does TOEFL, TOEFL, and GRE matter during the selection? I would say that there definitely is a cutoff. It might not be written in the requirement list for every single program. Obviously, the higher the better, but after a certain point or after a certain grade, it doesn't really make a big difference, in my opinion. So as long as you can show that you have that basic level of proficiency, I don't think it is worth your time to get 1 point higher than the previous test that you took, if that is what you're aiming for. I think it would make much more of a bigger difference if you improved on your pathology-related experiences or what you can show of yourself in other aspects in the application. Does anyone else have anything to add?
I totally agree with what you just said. Just want to mention that for GRE score, many schools actually have what score they want you to have on their graduate school website. So make sure to check that out, and they will have like a basic score that you can have an idea about how much you want to score.
Great. So next one, does age and previous experience matter during the selection?
I'm assigned to this question, and I would say personally, I don't think age matters, but I do think previous experience matter. I would say that you don't have to prepare more experiences than typical American applicants would have, but you have to prepare the right experience, I would say. Because let's think about from the program's perspective, they want you to be interested in pathology. They want you to be able to complete the program. So in your CV, you'll have to show them evidences or some experiences that you have to show that you are able to complete it, and then you are interested in pathology. So that's in my opinion. You don't necessarily need to have internship or master experiences in your CV, as long as you can show some kind of experiences that demonstrate your interest. But I would say those experiences would definitely help. It just, in my opinion, I don't think it's necessary, because think about like typical American applicants. Usually they take rotations 2 weeks in the pathology rotation, or they did externships in other schools for a couple of weeks, and then they apply for the residency. So I think if you prepare experiences similar to what they have, that should be sufficient. And the other thing is that I would say research experiences helps. As long as you can demonstrate you have research experiences, definitely if you have paper that's published, that'll be great. But if you have attended a pathology laboratory, let's say, or you have, if you have joined a lab and you have some sort of presentation, oral or poster presentation that you have done, I think all those little things help for you to be considered a good applicant. But definitely having like a research degree in master's or PhD would definitely help. It just, in my opinion, I would say those are not necessary, but would be helpful. If anybody has anything other things to add, please chime in.
Just one thing that we often talk about applicants at our program is that even if you, let's say you graduate from vet school and you don't go directly into the world of pathology and you are in general practice for a little bit, that doesn't really change anything in the review process, but I think it's important to have a foot in the world of pathology somehow, either just attending ACVP conferences or CL Davis courses that we can just take while we're at home. As long as you can prove that you are continuously interested in this field, I think that would make a bit of a difference. And just to go to one of the questions that was in the Q&A box. What do you consider most important when applying for residency? Since it's related to the previous questions, I think that, well, at least for Cornell, the section chief usually says that the least important is grades, vet school grades. So I wouldn't be too worried if your grades are not the highest. And I think the previous experiences and passion for pathology and proving that you can succeed in the program and after graduating from the program would be more important.
Yeah, I want to add to that as well. I would say that you never know what is the attractive point for the program to select you as an applicant. I can give my example to you guys to give you a perspective. So I was fortunate that I received the ACVP externship scholarship during as a vet student when I'm visiting a pathology program. And when I was interviewed, one of the interviewer mentioned that that was one of the things that makes me stand out in all the applications, because it's not common for international applicants to receive those type of scholarships. But I wouldn't expect that was one of the things that they would value. So try your best to get exposure and experiences in all kinds of fields in the pathology, and you never know what will help you eventually to get to your current position.
I also want to add a little bit on that. I think that was a really good point, Cheng and Cheng. But that it's not only about your experiences and your grades and your like hard things in your CV. It's a lot about how interested are you? How sure are you that you want to do pathology? And how far along do you have a vision for yourself? Like, for me, going into the application the first time, I wasn't as sure that this is what I wanted to do as the second time, because I had gained more experience and I knew more, and I knew that I knew more that I wanted to do this. And that like insecurity, like, yeah, sure, I think pathology is right for me, but I don't really know yet. That shows, even though you try to hide it. And it's important for the programs to have applicants that are passionate about this and are going to stay in the program and are going to finish and are going to do pathology. So it's a hard thing to like fake, if you will, like, but you have, if you're not sure you want to do this, you have to figure that out. And it's good if you can document you figuring that out somehow, like, and also it really helps to have a kind of clear plan on where you want to go after residency and what you want to do within pathology. Like, that's something in my program here that we look at a lot when you get to the interview stage, and like, what's your bigger picture, what's your vision? So I think you should think about that.
Great points. Just to add one more thing, sorry. I think it depends on the program again, but at Cornell, we have a large resident group. So another important thing that we look for is how well that applicant fits into the group. So again, it helps to visit the program and be here in person, or just do a virtual visit and see how well you or the particular applicant fits into the group, because that might be something that the program would be looking for, and it would be beneficial for you as well, because you don't want to end up in a program that you don't like or end up with people that you don't really fit well with. Okay.
Sure.
Yes.
Do you think I can maybe impose just for a second and make a
Please
comment?
do.
I have to leave because I have to go to lecture. For those that you don't know me, I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Davis-Thompson Foundation, and I wanted to add some information. This is very useful, by the way, every one of you. Thank you very much. You know that the foundation and also the LCPG, and you have the president here, Paola Barato, have funds for externships. You need to be a member, either the foundation or the LCPG, but keep it in mind, and you and everybody listening. And another really minor comment, some programs, ours is an example, do not require TOEFL or GRE. We just do an interview, usually on the phone or Skype, and if your English is enough, So maybe something to consider when you are looking for your residency. And that's all I wanted to say. Keep going. Sorry I interrupted, and thank you for letting me talk.
No, thank you. That was very useful.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, I guess we can move on to the next question. How does the visa work, or have we had any issues with this matter?
All right, I'm gonna give you my humble experiences with the visa situation. Most programs, when you go into residency, that's not the combined with a PhD or master, I think you will be applying for a J1 visa, which is like an international scholar visa. If you are in a combined program with a master or PhD, you will be applying for F1 visa. F1 visas are, from what I've heard, like more straightforward and it's a bigger visa group, and it applies for like international students. So I think that's might be a little less weird. It's a technical term. The J1 visa is you have like the international office from the university, when you get the acceptance letter, will prepare the visa application for you and help you through the process. So I think it helps to be like in a larger university, which has like an international office that can deal with that, because it's quite a lot of paperwork. And I think that's, and now I'm speculating, I think that's the reason some programs don't want to accept international students, is that they don't want to deal with that. But in the big programs, they have people that can help you out. They will prepare the application. You will have to go to the US Embassy in your country. I think you actually don't have to go in your country, but it has to be outside the US, to do a short interview and get the stamp, and then you're good to go. The problems gets into, like, if you're on the J1 visa, you might end up getting a 2-year home requirement, and I can't go into all the details with that, but that's something that's decided by the person at the embassy who stamps your visa papers. And that might mean that after your residency, you may have to be in your home country for a couple of years before you go back to the US if you want to work in the US. And there's no similar thing for the F1 visa that I know of. So that makes J1 visa a little more difficult. Like, if you're not funded by your home government or by the US government, you shouldn't get that 2-year home requirement. But it seems to be like a little bit unpredictable whether you get it or not. Maybe it's just unpredictable because I don't actually know the rules very well, but it's something to keep in mind. Also, if you have a spouse coming with you, they can come with you on the F1 visa and on the J1 visa. But if you're on an F1 visa, they can't work or study in the US. If you're on a J1 visa, they can apply for work permits and like be more free here. So that's also something that matters. I don't think it's that easy to bring partners that you're not married to, but I also don't actually know that. So very open to other people's experiences. My only issue personally I've had with it is that I got a stamp that I did get the 2-year home requirement in one of my documents, but in my other document, my passport, I got the stamp that I didn't need it. So that meant that I had to like apply for a clarification officially from when I was here to the immigration center. And that took like months. And then they clarified that I actually don't have it. So that it's, yeah, that's why. Other than that, it went fairly smooth. Apart from having to travel to Sweden from the Caribbean to do a 5-minute interview in an embassy, which was expensive. But I think it's been a little harder during COVID because people on J1 visa had to apply for an exception to get into the US, but I'm under the impression that that has changed. So.
Yeah, so I can keep going on this subject about the visa issue. So actually, because I'm funded by my own government, so I do have to go back home for 2 years. That's on my DS 2019 that I do have to go, unless I do a J1 waiver. And that's another process that it's still possible, that you just have to show to prepare all the materials. And also another thing is because for me, for J1 visa, you can also have like an academic training, and that's considered, I think, similar to the F1 visa, that the OPT part, because I'm studying a PhD program. So after finishing my PhD program, I can actually have a 3-year, I think, yeah, at most 36 months academic training. And that's actually kind of similar to the OPT training, because I know for STEM, STEM, if you're in those fields, STEM fields, then if you're holding F1 visa, you can use your OPT for 1 year and then extend for another 2 years so that you can work in the US. And after that, you have to consider apply for H-1B if you want to keep staying in the United States. And I know for a lot of schools, so visa is actually an important issue that you have to contact to the coordinator and discuss about it, because some of the schools I know, they are not giving J1 anymore. So that means that they don't accept international students. I think, for example, Oklahoma State, they don't, I think next year they're not going to accept that. And for Auburn, I know they accept F1 because that's also a combined residency program. And some of my friends, they studied their PhD here. So they are using their OPT for their residency. So that's another way that you can come up with if you're applying firstly just for your or even master. I think that also works. So you can also just apply for a master or a PhD, and then after that you can use your OPT, because that's for 3 years that you can stay in the US. But make sure that sometimes if you are enrolled in the clinical part of the program, if that is not listed as STEM, then you only have 1 year OPT. So yeah, that's what I want to mention.
This is a really daunting and complicated issue for us international applicants, but the good news is that many of the programs do have people specifically working on visa issues for residents and students, so they can help you out a lot when applying or when looking at how to solve these visa issues. Okay, it is nearly 1, but we are continuing on to answer all the questions that are in the pre-list and the Q&A box. Okay, so next question, what is the cost involved in the overall application process?
So I have this question, and I would say it really depends, because since if you are applying and you want to do externship, then you may need your own funding. But if you're just doing the application in your home country, and it depends on the school, because sometimes the school may require you to apply through their website, I mean their school website. So if that is the case, then you may have to pay for the application fee, and that's maybe around 80 to 100. It depends on the school that you apply for. Otherwise, for some school, they're just asking about the CV and letter of intent and all the recommendation letters that directly email to the coordinator. So that way, then it doesn't have any cost because it's just email. So it depends on each program. And sometimes I know some program, if they're finally accepting you, then they will let you do the school application, but unless that they're accepting you. But otherwise, they're also just doing the email process that you email all the materials to the coordinator. So that way, the cost is actually pretty low.
I would probably also add, don't forget that if you have to take the TOEFL and the GRE, it's approximately $200 each. So that's also a cost to consider if you need to apply to a graduate program.
I would also add that some programs you do have to pay a fee to do externships if you're not an enrolled student in a university that collaborates with them. I know here at UC Davis, it's not that cheap to come in as an extern. I actually don't remember what the actual cost is, but if you do like a real externship and you're not a student enrolled in other university, it's at least above $1,000, I think. Not for visiting. You can visit, but not do like a rotation. So that's something.
Great. Next question. Do residency programs provide a salary or a stipend? If so, how much? Is there any financial aid for international students? And what is the cost of life during residency? So I think this would totally depend on where you are, geographic location wise. So we'll have two people answering this question.
I can start probably. I would say, to my understanding, most programs in the US do provide a salary, and it's usually based on the cost of life in the area. So the salaries that are offered by the residency programs allow you to live normally in the area. Like, you're not going to make a ton of money during your residency, but you can live a normal life. I think that's that was one of the major differences to me with European programs. Some of them in Europe ask you to pay to actually study for 3 years, so you don't have a salary and you also have to pay the school, or they offer pretty low stipends, like 1,500 a month, which does not really allow you to live without using your own funds again. So yeah, I think that UC Davis and Cornell have the highest salaries, but the areas are pretty expensive to live in. So it seems pretty fair. I think that in our group, everyone lives pretty decently. And I'm unaware of financial aid for international students around here. So I'm sorry, but I can't really answer that. I don't know if anyone has experience with that.
I would echo that this is really depending on where you live. And you can pretty much find a stipend online in each programs on their website. And if you're curious about what's the cost of living in that area, you can pretty much just search, like the cost of rental apartments, things like that online. You can have an idea about like how much you're going to pay each month. And also, I'm not aware of any financial aid for the international students. From my experience, I feel like the salary they provide is usually between the salary of a graduate student and a postdoc. You're in between, so it will give you you can live a normal or decent life with that salary, I would say.
And I think if you're, sorry,
No,
just add on that if you're a student in the university, then you can, of course, apply for various of scholarships. So that will aid you.
I would also add that I don't think you're allowed on the visa requirements for J1 at least to receive any financial aid through the US. So even if you were to be offered it, like during the pandemic, they send out pandemic money. You can't accept that. That's like a violation of your visa. So just be mindful of that. California is pretty expensive, but the salaries are like, as other people have alluded to, like they are matched to the costs of living where you're at pretty much. So you can live comfortably.
Okay, the next question is how competitive are the programs and how difficult it is for international students? So again, I can only speak for Cornell because I do know how many applications we have received in the past 2 years and how many we have selected, but it is very competitive. I think the bottom line is that every program is very competitive, and I always thought that it was particularly difficult for international students just because the selection committee doesn't know what kind of education you have gone through, Whereas if it's an American applicant, they at least know that it is from an ABMA accredited school, so that there is that basis. But for some programs, I do think that there are programs that treat international students and American applicants equally. And some might even prefer to have a bit of diversity in their residents, so that they would not necessarily prioritize, but seek out international students. So I think that would also depend on the program itself. But yes, again, it is very competitive no matter where you apply to. And yes, you just have to work out to get a better application material when you are preparing for the application.
Yeah, and I would add on like how difficult it is for international students. So at least for me in the beginning, I think language barrier is a very big part that I have to overcome, because sometimes I just don't understand what they're talking about. And also in the same time, another difficult thing is as a resident, you have to teach the vet students, not only during the rotation and also maybe in the class. So this is something that you have to consider, because if you're just freshly graduating from vet school and now you're going to United States and speaking a language that you don't really excel in, and then now you're teaching the students as well. So that's something I think that initially I struggled with, because the language barrier, and also I have to take a lot of classes, so you have to listen to all the classes in English. So that's something that you have to overcome too.
Good point. Next question is, how are the monthly or weekly duties like? So again, I think it would depend totally on where you are. So maybe we can get a short snapshot of what you guys are experiencing.
So if I can start, at Davis, the first 2 years, all the different tracks do the same program where we're at the veterinary medicine hospital. You rotate. I think that's pretty similar for most programs, that you're either on necropsy duty or biopsy duty or on no duty. And in this program, we have maybe 15 weeks a year where we're on duty. And the rest of the weeks are like finishing up your cases after duty and doing your residency project. I think that's a little less than in most programs, because we are like a bigger group of residents to share the duties. So, but when you're on necropsy or biopsy, it's pretty intense work hours. Like you basically work as much as you can during those weeks. On necropsy duty here, you supervise students on the necropsy rotation. So it's a lot of like student managing in addition to doing necropsies. And on biopsy here, we don't have students. So that's more just looking at biopsies. A lot of the time in the program, and the best time in my opinion, is this time by the microscope with the pathologists. So for necropsy duty, that happens after your necropsy week, where you actually go over the histology of the cases and finish your reports. And on biopsy, that's similar. You look at biopsies. Third year at Davis is a little different from many other programs, because we are a tracked program. So in the third year, you can either apply for the zoo exotic wildlife track, where you spend your third year on San Diego Zoo, or you can be in the lab animal track, which I am, where you spend the third year at the Comparative Pathology Laboratory doing mostly rodents, and the primate center doing only primates. Or in the standard track, you're more aimed for like an academic career. So in your third year, you stay at the BMTH, but you take on like more of like faculty role, where you are on necropsy without having a boarded pathologist on. So you supervise earlier residents in addition to like still learning. So I guess third year here, and that might be the same for other programs, you're more independent, you're more expected to work independently, like little less supervision, pathology work. That's us.
So I'm also going to talk about this question, and I can maybe share my screen. So it's just a snapshot that I randomly put something on that to give you a feeling of how the daily life looks like. So, for example, for the first one, it's when you're teaching or you're also discussing your board preparation. So the schedule is like this. So when we are teaching, we don't do duties. So maybe for one semester that you're on teaching, you don't have to do duties. And that's what I'm doing now. So I'm not going to be on duty for this semester because I'm teaching, but I still have all the rounds that I have to participate in. And also we have some our own individual discussion sections that I have to participate in. And for when you are on duty, for example, this is the week of the necropsy. So we usually do the necropsy in the afternoon. So because for my program, it's a combined residency program. So I still have to take class, and it really depends on your class schedule. So you can see on maybe on Monday, Wednesday, you have class, and Thursday, another class, and then you have your rounds going on. So it really depends on your schedule, class schedule. And on Saturday and Sunday, you're on call if we have necropsy cases, and that's usually in the morning, unless there's some like courses, then we may do it in the when they call us. And this is the daily life for if you're on biopsy. And so basically you have to read the slides every day, and maybe in the afternoon you can review with the professor and finish up the case before next day. That's what we usually do for biopsy cases. Yeah, and still participate in other rounds, for example, phase 1 and journal club or growth round. So that's pretty much it. But I do know that every program has their own because for Ohio State, Cheng may talk about it, that they only do necropsy in the first year, and then later on they do all biopsy. And for us, it's all combined. But because we also have to do research, so the lifestyle is kind of busy because you have to rotate between the research and also the rounds and also your duty. So that's pretty intense. Okay.
Looking at the schedule, it looks very different to what we have. So I think, yes, it's totally variable depending on where you are or where you're applying to. So it's best if you look into the website of the programs that you are interested in, and better if you can talk to the residents or faculty members at that program to see what it is like at that particular program you're interested in.
Yeah, and also the case load is also different between the programs. Yeah, that's also one thing that you can ask with the coordinator, because for us, for the first year, it's pretty low since we're also trying to set up our research. So for example, the biopsy case, you only have to do 1 to 3 cases per day for the first semester. And then later on, but you can do more if you want. So for now, I think daily biopsy cases for me, I usually do more than 10 or up to 20, if that's a lot. Yeah, but for necropsy cases, it's also different between the schools, because for us, the necropsy cases are not super high. I think for 1 week, it's around 10 cases. But I think that also varies between schools.
Excellent. Okay, the next question is, what were the most enjoyable and frustrating experiences during your program?
I think it's a bit of a toughie because there is definitely a lot that comes from the COVID pandemic. And actually the most frustrating thing at the start was not to have many people around in the office to actually understand how things were working. I was kind of lucky to still have Show around, and he arrived a bit before me, so he could help me out. And also to have people really available by email or on WhatsApp. Or we made it work out as best as possible, but that was really frustrating. But on a better note, I would say that strictly regarding the program and not like personal life and so on, the most enjoyable thing is to be able to build my schedule the way I want when I'm off service, because our program is really case-based. We don't have any classes. So when you're on necropsy duty, you're on the floor for 1 week. You teach students, you manage the necropsies, you help manage the texts and so on. And then you do readouts for 1 or 2 weeks. And biopsy is 1 week. And then you're supposed to have a bit more time to write all your addenda, because we send out reports and then addenda with additional details if needed. And all the weeks that you're not on necropsy or biopsy are supposed to be off of service weeks for our research projects or for our personal study time. And I really always enjoyed just being able to look into whatever I wanted to do and not having to attend classes. That's one of the main reasons why I also was interested in Cornell, not having to do some classes-based learning again. And then best part is definitely friends, 100%. If we're not talking about the program itself, just the group is amazing.
Okay, I guess we can move on to the last question. What is your career plan after acquiring board certified specialty? Cheng, do you want to start this since you are board certified now?
Sure. And I would say that I would encourage everybody to put this question in their heart while they're applying for a residency program, because that will definitely help you and direct you what program you want to apply for and what you are going to do after you finish up your program. So I would say, as I mentioned earlier, I've always wanted to be in academia because I truly enjoy doing diagnostics as well as doing teaching and some research. So I've always been targeting jobs in academia, and that's what I'm planning to do in my future. But I would say that there are many options for a board certified pathologist. If you want to work in the US, you can work in the academia industry, you can work in the state diagnostic lab or private diagnostic lab. There are plenty of options for you. And so it's very good for you to start to think about where you want to end up being or where you want to end up doing for your lifetime job, and decide which program you want to apply for or what type of externship you want to do in order to find out what you like to do in the future. So yeah, that's kind of my word. So my advice, just keep in mind, think about it, and then this will help you to navigate where you want to be in the future.
If I may ask, do you plan to go back to Taiwan or do you plan to stay in the US?
That's a wonderful question. I would say in short term, probably not. And I'm very glad that you brought this up because I think it's also a good question for everybody who's on this talk, because you want to look into what's the job requirement in the place that you want to be at later on. If you want to go back to be a pathologist in your country, probably they don't require you to have ACVP or ECVP, and instead they want you to have a PhD degree and many publications. And so you may want to rethink whether doing a residency is worthwhile for you if that's what the job you want to do. But if you want to end up in the US and probably doing academia or like a pharmaceutical company job, you want to consider, you know, like getting a pathology residency done and also a PhD. But if you want to work in the diagnostic labs, you probably you will want to gain more diagnostic experience, and having a residency program, completing a residency program would be sufficient. So yeah, thank you for bringing up that questions, and I would encourage everybody to think about it.
Excellent, thank you very much. Does anyone want to add anything? Talk about their career plans? I just want to add that, as Cheng was saying, I think it makes a difference on the application itself to have a clear goal. I know it's going to change during the residency. You might be interested in lab animals when you start off, and then you might end up being a wildlife pathologist. So I think it's totally fine to change your career options, definitely. But I think it is nice to have a clear goal at the very start, at least, to know which path you want to end up in and what you can bring out of the program. Yeah. If not, I guess we can start answering the additional questions that we have in the Q&A box. The first one, how can we convert a PhD program into a combined PhD and residency? Suzanne, do you want to answer this? I'm not really sure about this question.
Sure. So actually, Cheng can also answer this question. I think it's also depending on the program that you're entering. So it's going to be different because what I heard from other friends that, for example, Georgia, they have also a combined residency program. But for them, the first 3 years is mostly just doing residency. So they also take their board exam, the final phase 2 exam after the 3-year residency. And then they, I think during the 3 years, they also start to think what research they want to do. And they also take some classes, but mostly just residency duties. So after 3 years, they start to do their research. And I think for our program, it's different from that. So we are a total combined program. So for the first year, you do have to, some people rotate between labs. And because for us, the program is designed to be a 5-year program. So the first year, we have to do duties for 12 weeks. But other than that, you have to take class and rotate between labs and find your professor and start your research and talk about your goal. And then later on, it's all combined until the 5th year that when you're graduating, you're still on duty. But of course, the timeline you can try to adjust to your schedule for board preparation, but it's really a combined one. And so it's really hard to, you have to keep in mind that, oh, you're doing biopsy now, but next week you may have to order your reagents for your PhD study because you have to keep everything online. Yeah, that's kind of hard, but it's also a learning process.
Yeah, I totally agree all what you said. I guess I'm not very sure about what convert means in this question. I think there are 2 scenarios. The first one being what Susan just said, that you applied and you are accepted into a combined PhD and residency program, so you don't have to convert. But the second scenario is that I've heard of friends who had this type of experiences where they are accepted as a PhD student in a lab, and maybe their advisor is a pathologist, and maybe they will be able to evaluate the student further and potentially help the student to be able to be a good candidate for their pathology residency program. So sometimes the students will end up finish up their PhD and get accepted into their residency program. So I guess that would be another way to work out if you want to kind of come here to the US and starting to see how the pathology program looks like and get to know people who may be able to help you to write a recommendation letter. I think that will be another way to go.
I think I can add to that if you're in an institution that runs a residency program or has a pathology department for your grad studies, and you have the possibility to network and participate in pathology rounds, I think that's a good idea. I think you can also apply, if you find someone to sponsor you and have pathology related work, you can apply for an alternate route to sit the phase 1 exam of the pathology boards, which will help you. I sat the phase 1 before starting my residency because I had the opportunity to do it through my internship, and that gave me I think a little edge to my application, and B, more space during my residency program to do other things than studying for phase 1. So I know a couple of grad students who've sat phase 1 during their grad school. I don't know of any who sat phase 2 or did the complete alternate route, but at least phase 1, I think you can manage to start on your pathology training. You can also go the other way. Like if you do a residency and want to stay on for a PhD, I think you have a pretty competitive application for a PhD with the boards done. So that's what I'm doing. I'm applying for grad school here after finishing. So
Yeah. So, oh, sure. You want to
Go ahead.
I'll just add on that. Yes, echo to Judith that actually some people they do apply for alternative track. So that's another way. So they do their PhD work or other research, and then if you can find a sponsor, then you can actually still take phase 1 and phase 2. That's another way. And some people just finish their PhD program and then apply to, and then you can have a lot of maybe recommendation letter, and then you apply for other residency program.
Okay, the next question, please, can we talk more about the letter of intent? Does anyone want to tackle this?
I can tackle it. Not that I'm the best at this. I really struggle with writing letters of intent. But I think it's important to, as we alluded to earlier, to show passion and show intent, like long-term, what you want to do in pathology. I also think it's important to show it to people, even though it's scary. And I also think I want to kind of go into a question about how to deal with reapplying. That was addressed later in the Q&A, where you you apply for residencies, you don't get any, how to move on from that. And since I've been in that position, I can say that I think if you don't even get to the interview stage, you need to work on your formal application. That probably means adding more experiences, having people look through your CV, having people look through your letter of intent, and making sure that you do a stronger application. If you, on the other hand, do get a lot of interviews but don't get offers, you're probably qualified. Like, they wouldn't have called you to interview if you didn't have a strong application. And then it's a little bit more out of your hands. I mean, every program just accepts 1 or 2 or potentially 3 applicants. We get a lot of wonderful candidates that you just want to work with, all of them, and we can't hire all of them. So you're a little bit out of luck sometimes, depending on who's applying at the same time as you. So it's not necessarily you. And when I got rejected from all the residencies I applied from vet school, I was a little bit, my feelings were a little bit hurt. I do interpret the rejections as probably not having a strong enough application, since I even didn't get to the interview stage. So I did work on that, but I would also being on the other side of it, interviewing people instead of being interviewed. I would try to give the advice not to take it personally. If you get to an interview stage and you don't get accepted, it's not because everybody hates you, which it feels like. It's because there are so many great applicants. And I would also encourage people, if they have it in them, to apply again. I was a little worried going out from being rejected a lot of times, going into applying again. And I was worried people would see that I applied before and be like, oh no, not that person again. But I think it's actually helped my application, being able to show that I've been in this for a while and I'm still want to do this. That helps strengthen your intent. So that would be, I feel for everyone who gets rejected, but that would be my advice. Just keep at it.
I'm going to jump on the rejection train. And so I agree that getting a lot of no's, even if you have tried 5 or 6 programs, I mean, it hurts. I was still lucky enough that I did get an interview with Cornell during my first year. And what I did was just email them and ask them, hey, I'm really interested in the program still. What can I improve? They actually just wrote in the email, just get more experience. That's it. And then try and visit if you can, more experience, visit. And that's literally what I did. I worked as hard as I could during 1 year. I improved my CV, visited the program, visited a couple other programs, and I actually got more interviews the next time, which was really great. Not a bunch of no's again. So yeah, keep at it. but don't do it blindly. Like, ask questions to the programs, just contact them, ask them what you can improve, try and work on your formal application again if you don't get to the interview stage. That's probably the best to do. And don't get discouraged. That's the hardest part, I think.
It's really hard. I also want to add that I think it's if you're at the stage where you get interviews but don't get offers, it would probably help applying for more programs, because then you're like in the eligible pool, you're in the well, we're interested pool, and then it's a little bit up to how many other qualified applicants are there. So if you, I think there's a lot of programs in the US and there's a lot of really good programs. So if you, and since we're international, we're moving anyway. So I would encourage you to like widen out from the most popular programs, probably.
Excellent, thank you. So I guess that kind of answers the other question. How can we improve if you are rejected? Is there anything that you guys want to add? I guess you can always ask again to get feedback from those programs and just maybe show it to other people too. Okay, and just on the part of the letter of intent, I do want to add that since many programs get a lot of applications, I think it doesn't really help to have like 6 pages of like material that you want to show, even though you want to show it. Just try to keep it concise and have the most important points in a relatively short, at least 1 or 2 pages, 2 pages max, just 1 page is probably better. Okay, last question. What are the important tips about face-to-face interviews with universities?
I can take that one because I just noticed, well, just from experience having interviewed people this year, just prepare the basic questions that you would get in any professional interviews, like what are 3 strengths and what are 3 of your flaws? Just really basic questions like that you might be asked, and you can prepare them in advance and actually use them to make your application stronger. And it's a lot of time gained. It's a lot of stress that you can evacuate because you have prepared some things beforehand. I would also probably encourage you to have in mind the reasons why you actually enjoy pathology, probably a couple interesting cases that you have encountered during your experiences in pathology, your career goals. And if you're doing a remote interview, just make sure that at least you're dressed properly, like your top is appropriate, and that you're not in a noisy environment or somewhere that anyone can just enter and interrupt you. That's pretty important.
Yeah, I totally agree what Sophie just said. I would say practice as much as possible, as much as you feel comfortable saying it, because as international applicants, we all know that English is our second language, and it's very hard to just say without having a draft initially. So I would encourage, if you're preparing for an interview, write down questions that you think they will ask you, like, why do you want to apply to this program? Why, what attracts you to apply to this program, and what's your career goal? And also prepare for questions like behavior type of questions, because those questions are designed for knowing whether you are an easy person to, work with. Things like, how do you deal with a conflict? Can you give me some examples? I think those are very valid questions that you will be asked. So if you don't feel comfortable answering questions with English for the first time, just write down those questions, practice conversation with people, and this will give you confidence.
I would also want to, yeah, I completely agree with those things. I think you should practice. I think you should be nice. I think maybe you should maybe avoid joking too much, because that can be like culturally hard to understand when, like, between, even if you're good at English, I think understand when people are joking, and for them to understand when you are joking are more subtle and it's harder to get across. So if you're compulsive, like ironic or joking a lot, maybe try to not do that. I would also encourage you to prepare questions you have for the program, because it is a situation when they are interviewing you, but it's also a situation when you are interviewing them. You want to make sure to take the opportunity to see that this is really a good fit for you. And that also, in my experience, makes me a little less nervous when I see it more as like a blind date than them like evaluating me. Both sides need to like each other. So interview them back, but not in a rude or too harsh manner, probably.
I just want to add that interviews are usually just like for 15 minutes or 30 minutes, and you want to let the interviewers know who you are and who you are like to work with in that limited time. So practice definitely is important, but again, I think it is much easier if they knew you beforehand, of your personality and how you might work like. So if you do have the luxury to do a virtual externship or just meet residents or faculty members beforehand, that probably will be it will be beneficial for everyone.
That is also something, like, that's something we look at a lot here, like if we think the applicants will be easy to work with. And I would encourage you, if you have writers of your letters of reference that are not in the US system and that are not used to what needs to be in a letter of reference, maybe to encourage them to like include things about that you are easy to work with, if you are easy to work with, because that's something I think that matters to some programs.
Okay.
Great. Sorry.
No, don't worry. I just to also share something of my experience with the question about what happens if you are rejected. The other option is the alternative route. The alternative, the routes to present the awards for the ACPP also include not only residency, also alternative route. If for some people who have some experience and who have the support for some diplomates, this route could be useful. So also could be an option for several rejections or something like this.
Excellent point. Thank you very much. I don't see any more questions in the question box. So I guess that is all. I believe that everyone, or all the panelists that are here today, will be happy to answer any additional questions if you send us an email. I don't know how we can put our emails in the chat, maybe. But yes, please feel free to reach out to us if you do have any additional questions.
Okay. Thank you so much for your moderation. Thank you so much for all of you for sharing your experience with all the details, with the dedication to organize all the information. It's very, very useful for all the people who are here participating with this webinar. According with the authorization, we are going to have this recording for 3 months in the Davis-Thompson Foundation YouTube site. So also there the people can find the information that you share with us today. Also, of course, the greetings for Ileana and for all the people who are behind of this organization. From my part, it's more thank yous for you. And okay, for tomorrow we are going to have the webinar of this similar roundtable in Spanish and in Portuguese for the people also who speak in that language. So thank you so much.
Thank you for organizing, and thanks everyone for attending this webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
I can leave the webinar open if you guys want to put real quick your contact information on the chat so people can copy that. But you're okay to sign out if you want to do so.
Sophie, can you put mine as well?
Wait, okay. Is that, hold on,
649.
69?
649. SN
649. Okay, I forgot the first.
649, yes. Okay. Okay, bye. Have a nice afternoon. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you, Rafaela, for your help, for your support.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Bye.